Okay, so today I want to talk to you if you're in a place where you're feeling like you're stuck in your singleness. I am speaking from personal experience here because I remember so clearly being at this place where I was getting closer to 30. That was the age for me at the time. I had one friend who told me she just got engaged and she was planning a wedding. I had another friend who told me she was pregnant, she was having a baby. My little sister was already married. And all of these scenarios were scenarios I wanted so badly. But the problem was, I was single. Like, I didn't even feel close to any of those scenarios actually happening in my life. And that was so frustrating for me. And so it made me feel like I was stuck, like my life was at a standstill. Like there was a place that I wanted to be and a place that I was. And until I found a relationship, I couldn't move forward into any of those things that I desired. So that was an incredibly frustrating feeling. And if you are in that position, I can totally relate. Um, so I want to give you one thing today that I felt like really shifted everything for me. And this particular thing that I want to talk to you about is something that I feel like got me from where I was to where I am now. So if you don't already know where I am now, I am married. I'm in a thriving, beautiful relationship. I actually run a page where I give singleness advice and encouragement on Instagram. I wrote a book all about how to navigate the struggles of singleness. This exact scenario that I'm talking about, like all of the mindset shifts, the things you can actually do in your singleness to thrive and to move you closer to marriage. All of that is included in the book that I wrote. And along with the story of how I got to meet the man that I'm with right now. So those resources I feel like will really, really help you, the Instagram page and the book. I will link them below. But okay, so if that's where I am right now. Something had to change between then when I was stuck and now where I am. So, one thing that really stood out to me, I remember sitting in church one week and he was talking about the parable of the sower, which for me, this was a story I had heard a bunch of times. But what he was saying stood out to me in a new way. So, if you're not familiar with that story, quick recap, it's basically in the Bible, it describes a farmer goes out, he plants seed on the ground. Some of the seed falls in the cracks of the rocks. That seed doesn't grow. Some of it gets eaten by the birds. That seed doesn't grow. But then there's a third type of seed which really stood out to me. And that was seed that fell into good soil. It was starting to grow and flourish and thrive. But what stopped that was the presence of thorns and weeds that were in the garden. So those weeds just choked out what was growing. And again, no growth was happening. Everything was halted. So the reason this stood out to me was because this idea of everything being at a standstill resonated with me. But also in this story, it describes what those weeds and thorns represent. It says that the thorns represent the worries of this life and the desires for other things. So I had to stop and think about it for a second, but what I was consumed with were the worries of this life, which for me looked like, what if I am single forever? What if I missed my chance to meet someone? What if I don't ever find someone that meets the criteria that I'm looking for? So it was worries upon worries that would just circle over and over in my mind, paired with such a strong desire for marriage and children that I almost had blinders on. Like it was like, I need to get married, I need to have kids, this is the next thing, and I am just going to obsess all day long about how this isn't happening and be super upset about it. That's where I was. And so what I feel like really stood out to me was that that was how I had been living my life, so much so that those thought patterns and obsession were stunting any growth that could have been happening in my life. I was almost one track minded. Like I knew what was next for me, but I had never stopped to think or to question if maybe there was something else God had for me next. Like maybe marriage wasn't the very next thing for me, or maybe I wasn't going to be in a relationship the very next step of my life. Maybe there were other things that could be growing in my life that I could be growing in. And even though that was a scary thought, because I was like, wait a second, I don't want to do anything else besides date and get married. Um, I can say now, looking back on this whole process that I've been through, that asking myself, what is actually next for me right now? What could I actually be growing in right now? Like stopping to ask those questions is actually what got me to where I am right now. So, quick summary of my story, if you're not already familiar with it, is, at that point in time, I felt like, you know, I had these desires that would come up in me from time to time to share my singleness journey with other singles. To me, that felt like starting a singles group or a singles ministry, which didn't feel like what I actually wanted to be doing, getting married. So I had kind of these desires to do that, but I felt like entering into a singles ministry would almost be a distraction from what I actually wanted to do, which was date and get married. Turns out that the thing that God wanted to grow in me and do in my life was actually starting the singles ministry. I began to write a book. I began to start this Instagram page. And long story short, a year after starting this Instagram page, I'm still posting, I'm encouraging singles, I'm giving dating tips and advice. That's actually where I met my husband, through that page. And it's crazy to me to reflect back on that sometimes, because I'm like, wait a second. Had I never started that page, I would have never met my husband. So here I am thinking that the things God's leading me to do are a distraction from what I want, when really the things God was leading me to do led me to what I wanted, which just is absolutely crazy to think about. So I want to give like a couple disclaimers here. I'm in no way trying to say that, as soon as you stop thinking about marriage, that's when God brings you marriage. Because I know a lot of people preach that message. They say, oh, okay, you need to just stop looking for it and it'll find you. I don't believe in any of that. I believe in, if marriage is something you desire, go after it, date, do all of those things, but not at the cost of suffocating anything else that God would want to do in you. So for me, I was so focused on what I wanted that if there was anything that he was trying to stir up in me or lead me towards, I was closed off to it because I wanted nothing but what I wanted. So when I could actually ask, what is it that God wants me to do right now? How does God want me to be spending my time right now? The answer wasn't what I wanted right away. It was go start a singles ministry. And I was like, yay. But actually, it led me to my husband. The other thing that I want to say is that I'm also not saying that, if you sit there and you can find that one thing God wants you to do and do that one thing, that's how you'll meet your husband. Like, I'm not making any husband finding claims here. But the claim that I will make is that if you are looking for God's blessings, you want all of the gifts he has to give you, which would include a spouse and every other good thing he has for you. You're only going to find those things when you're walking along the journey that he has for you. So trying to strive and do it in your own way is sometimes counterproductive, because ultimately trying to figure out what it is God wants you to be doing right now is going to lead you into the path God has for you, the flow God has for you. And ultimately, if a relationship is something he wants to bless you with, which I'm sure that if it's a desire you have, it is a good gift that God wants to bless you with. If that's ultimately what he wants to bless you with, it's going to be given to you in a place where he's led you, right? So I feel like I just want to really emphasize to you that stopping to say, what is it God would have me do right now? Might actually be the thing that moves you forward more than you ever imagined. It might not be a distraction, it might actually be your launching pad. So, what could that look like? Some practical things you could ask yourself is, are there anything, any little things stirring up inside me that I've always felt like, maybe I would like to do this someday. Like I've heard some people say, I kind of liked the idea of maybe starting a Bible study, or I like the idea of starting my own business. Whatever little things are, for me, it was write a book and start an Instagram page. Do those things. I'm not saying those things are going to lead you to your spouse. I'm not making that guarantee. But I will say that if there is growth that God wants to do through you and in you, step into that. It will not hold you back from what you want. If anything, it will get you even closer to what you're desiring because you will be seeking what it is God has for you. And if you sit there and you go, gosh, I don't know what it is God has for me. Sometimes the answer doesn't feel super cut and dry, but there's already other things that you have inside you that you know that you could be growing or working on right now. Maybe there's a habit that you want to get rid of that now's the time to do it. Maybe there's something you want to start. Now's the time to do it. Maybe there's an adventure to be had. There's something you've always desired to do, but you've just been waiting for a husband or a wife. Now is the time to do it. So the idea is to get your life off hold and to actually start stepping into things, actually start living your life now. So there's kind of two parts here. One of them is, if you had a garden that was trying to flourish, but weeds were getting in the way, the first thing you would have to do is remove the weeds, right? So what I would say to you is to first and foremost, take all those worries that you feel, the concerns and the overwhelming fears, have a conversation with God and say, God, I trust you with these. Like I'm actually putting these worries in your hands. So remove those obstacles, remove those worries. Know that he actually does have you. Like there's this Bible verse that I relied on heavily at the beginning of my relationship. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding, but in all of your ways, acknowledge him and he will direct your paths. So being able to not lean on what you see and what you know, but to hand it to God and say, God, I acknowledge you in this. Direct me. Then open yourself up to whatever that might look like. Anything that you maybe have a desire to do, have thought of doing, even if you don't know what that is, and you're like, all right, I guess I'm just going to spend more time with God. Do those things right now. So you want to remove the thorns, but then you want to actually cultivate the growth in your own life. Maybe that looks like healing from past traumas. Maybe that looks like going to counseling. I can create another video for you if you would like, detailing specifically the things that I would focus on in singleness. Now reflecting back on my singleness journey. And this is something I talk about in my book too. I actually, towards the end of the book, thoroughly talk about, looking back is what it's called. And I go through all of the things. They're like 4 buckets of things I would focus on in singleness, knowing all of the things that I know now. And I can also make a YouTube video on that. So check out the book. And if you would like a video on things you can be doing right now, let me know in the comments and I will make it for you. But until then, I would say just pay attention to the things that you desire, the things you like, the things you're good at. Foster those, foster growth in those. Foster growth in your own character development, and anything that needs to be kicked out of your life, anything that, if you're entering into a future marriage would not serve your marriage, would not serve you as a spouse, now is the time to get rid of it. So basically give yourself permission to explore life and recognize that that's not going to hold you up from what you want. So I hope this video is helpful to you. If it is, please subscribe. That way you can catch all the future videos I post and have an amazing day.